Great. Okay, so that means I know that we are going to be safe for recording. Okay, I think we maybe just give it one more minute and then I'll get started. I'm looking in the chat being like, I wonder how you are like me from Scotland who can get reliable internet. Because everyone else I know in Scotland has had no internet since the storm has battered them. Okay, let me share my screen and we can get started and people can join as they're free. Let me just go to present mode. Can everyone see that? I can just get a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Yeah, I've got some thumbs. Good. Okay, so tonight we're going to be all speaking about the Climate and Nature Bill. How do we deliver it into a Climate and Nature Act? So how do we deliver it into legislation and why it's needed? Now, what we're going to be covering, which is going to be all of this, so we're going to be covering this for some people who will be totally new to the bill and other people who have been with us right from the very beginning. So we're going to be covering what is the bill, why do we need new legislation on climate and nature, what we've achieved so far, so how can we show that this is actually having an effect, why building constituency pressure is so important to the next stage, how to prepare for meeting your MP and demonstrating that pressure, what we are going to do to help provide extra support, and a Q&A for any questions that come up specific to your constituency or broadly about the bill. So we will have time for all of this. We're hopefully going to run from now to about 8 o'clock. We might not get through every question, but you can email campaign@zerohour.uk if you do have questions and you want to get more involved or you want to know more about the bill. So what is the Climate and Nature Bill? Now, some people will know it as the Climate and Nature Bill. Other people will know it as the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill. Some people will know it as the Climate and Ecology Bill. But it's all part of the same campaign. It was first introduced by Caroline Lucas of the Green Party and has been introduced by various different MPs in Parliament. And most recently, it's been championed by Ros Savage, a Liberal Democrat. But what's really critical to the way that we work is that we are cross-party. So we work with people of all political parties saying, let's come together and deliver what the science says is needed. And that's why it's the first thing on this slide, if you can see that. We're science-led, so we are looking at what the gap between what legislation is currently offering and what the science says is needed, and how do we bridge that together. And a big part of what that science says is that essentially there's an international component to what we do in our impact on climate and nature that's not integrated into legislation. So when we look at the long-term things like shipping and imports, how do we integrate them more into our full impact? So when we're reducing our emissions or reducing our nature impact, we're looking at actually what our total impact is globally. And we're looking at an integrated plan. So how do we actually look at how climate and nature work together? So when we're taking nature and biodiversity policies, how do they actually factor into what our climate targets are and vice versa? And a really critical part of this, which is why a lot of people join the campaign, is also the involvement of people in communities. So how do we actually give people a voice and how do we deliver these targets? So how do we actually say that we should have climate and nature assemblies to try and inform the way that we actually deliver these targets? And the final point is sort of a little bit of repetition, but it's how do we take accountability for our full impact, shipping and imports? And a really key part of this, which we're really grateful for, a success we'll talk about later about the climate nature statement, is slowly trying to get through to government that this is an interconnected crisis, that saying that you're going to take climate action and having the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero doing one set of policies and having DEFRA doing work on biodiversity and nature as separate departments, they actually need to be a much more integrated approach to how they work. And this isn't just true nationally, it's true internationally too. So, how do we look at international conferences like COP29 or COP30 coming up this year, and the biodiversity conferences, and we actually say, how is there more knowledge sharing and interconnectedness between how we approach delivering on both of these, and see nature as an ally in the way that we meet our climate targets, and vice versa? How do we actually look at both ways? And we know it's very evident that the cost of inaction, the cost of not doing what the science demands, is enormous. This is a photo from the Los Angeles wildfires, but only about 6 miles from my house, there was one of the biggest wildfires in Scottish history. It took out an enormous amount of farmland. There was farmers who lost huge amounts of their income. So this is a food security issue. We are seeing the consequences of not keeping up with the science in communities all across the UK and, of course, globally. So we know that this is a food security issue, it's a health emergency, but it's also an economic one. You know, a huge amount of money being wiped out of GDP if we don't act. So it's not just a how do we actually prevent, but it's also how do we essentially protect our way of life. And we've said this previously, but I'm going to repeat it because of how important it is, which is the science-led part is really key to us. So we continue to speak to different experts in various fields about what the gaps are and what's needed. And that's why we're really grateful that we have well over 1,200 leading scientists, including Nobel Prize winners, who say this is actually needed. This is the legislation we need to plug some of the gaps that currently aren't there. And a big question that comes up quite a lot is saying, we've got the Climate Change Act, we've got the Environment Act, why do we need new legislation? And the biggest and most overly simplified, but the easiest way to explain that is to say the science has moved forward since those were put into law. So since then, we have had the Paris Agreement, where we agreed to keeping temperature warming below 1.5 degrees and well below 2 degrees. We've had the Global Biodiversity Framework, which was agreed as part of the Montreal Cuming Agreement. So we've had new international agreements. The UK has said we need to do more than what our existing legislation does, but none of that has been put into UK law. So all of that has been left to, we are aiming to do these things, but that isn't strong enough. We know that we need the action that follows the strong words we hear in international conferences. And that's at the core of what the bill's about. It's about how do we bridge the international agreements and what the latest science says is needed and put it into UK legislation. And this isn't just us saying it. This is a really key part to hit home, and I'm going to move something on my screen because it's in the way. But this is the net zero strategy, which the government themselves published, which speaks about the importance of 1.5. And I'll paraphrase, we can share this slide later, but the most important thing to look at this is saying above 1.5, we risk losing control of our climate for good. And this is the governments themselves saying that 1.5 is critical. And that's what the Paris Agreement is saying, and that's what we're trying to put into legislation, is the UK's, they call it an NDC, a nationally determined contribution, the UK's contribution towards international agreement on climate. We're saying, if that means we lose control of our climate for good, if that means huge amounts of flooding and risk to our health and food security, if we lose control of that, then we need to be putting that into legislation, saying that is the gold standard. How do we deliver on these international agreements? So the bill has these fundamental aspects. It has this, how do we not only halt nature loss, but reverse nature loss? The reason we think this is so critical, and such a critical difference, is the fact that if we just halt nature loss, the UK is some of the most nature depleted nations in the world. So halting nature loss doesn't actually deliver anywhere near what we need. We actually need to be nature positive. So how do we deliver the policies and the framework to help us on that path? And how do we deliver international commitments into law? We just touched on this. So how do we deliver the Paris Agreement, the Montreal Commoning Agreement into UK law? So when you hear these really exciting statements that are being made about what the UK is going to do, how do we know the government's going to deliver them? And we know that legally binding targets is a fundamental way of delivery. So how do we push that into delivery? It's by locking it into UK law. That currently doesn't exist. They could come out and say, this is our NDC. Our NDC is we're gonna decarbonize 100% by next year. They could say whatever they want. It's about how do we lock this into UK law to say you're held accountable to that. And this isn't just about the Labour Party. This is about whatever governments come next, because these targets are going to, we're going to need future and successive governments to uphold this, and locking it into law is a way that we can have that barrier to protect some of that vital cross-party agreement. And we've touched on this, but it's so important that we actually work in these policies together, interdepartmental work on how climate and nature interact with each other and how they can actually support the objectives of other government departments. And we'll touch on this in some of our successes so far in the way that we're already seeing the government shift towards this as a position. And international responsibility. Currently, many of you in this call will have heard something that gets thrown around a lot about 50% reduction in emissions since 1990. But also what happened since 1990 is a huge amount of deindustrialization. So what we did is we just started saying, actually, cars can be manufactured in Germany, or technologies can be manufactured in China, and that's their emissions, not ours, even though we are the ones demanding that. So we're trying to fix that gap and actually look at consumption-based emissions, what emissions are actually driven by the choices made across the UK. And consult the public. How do we actually integrate people's voices, communities up and down the country about how we deliver this? So how do we bring people along with us? And this part is really, really pivotal to a lot of people because it's what they don't feel currently. They feel like decisions are made to them rather than with them. And this is what we're trying to say needs to change. We need to actually say, how do you bring the communities along with them by giving them a place to actually say how we deliver this is just as important as actually delivering it itself, doing it in a just and fair way. So I've spoken a lot on what the bill is, and you might be sometimes a pessimist like I can be and think that's all well and good, but how are you actually going to deliver this, and will the government listen? And I'm going to switch my hat and immediately become an optimist and say, well, I believe that we can and we will, and the reason is because we're already seeing results. So this campaign's been running for a little under 5 years, but we've already got 250 parliamentarians backing the bill. This includes over 90 MPs within Labour, but we also have huge amounts of support across Lib Dems, across the Green Party, across SNP and others. So we have a huge amount of support of people who are saying, as the bill is, I'm completely behind it, this is what we need. So that's a huge amount already, and that is continuing to grow. We've also had two of the biggest Parliament moments for climate nature this year. We had the second reading, which took place on the 24th of January, where we've seen a huge amount of people across the House standing up and saying, actually, we're not doing enough and we need a more integrated approach. And we need to be working together on this. And whilst that led to an adjournment, so it led to a delay in the debate on the bill, it did lead to a huge amount of people asking questions about what's the bill doing, how can we work together on it, how can we have meetings together to actually look at where those gaps are. And the second big parliamentary moment happened only a few weeks ago, where a climate nature statement was made by government as a result of campaigners for this bill up and down the country who were calling on their MPs to say, we need an integrated approach. And while they didn't announce the full CAN bill, what they did say is that they're willing to work with Zero Hour, meet with Zero Hour about what's in the legislation, and look at an integrated approach of how can we bring climate and nature policies closer together. Now, what's really pivotal about that which is really, really important to hold on to, is that it's so rare for an environmental campaign to have the ear of the government. The government are actually saying, thank you for introducing this. We want to work with you on it. Now, as we're going to cover on later on the call, that's only the beginning. We need to use that, the ear of the government, to actually say, we now need you to deliver. You listening to us is only part of the problem. We actually need to say, how are you going to deliver it? So statements are one thing, international agreements are one thing, but how it's delivered is what we're here to do, is to say, lock it into law. And it's not just us saying that's what's needed. I've touched on some of these before, but over 1,200 scientists back the bill, 387 councils, including Birmingham, London Assembly, Manchester City Council. We've got 7 mayors who back the bill, and well over 1,000 organisations, including Oxfam, Greenpeace, National Trust, lots of these big national organisations with huge membership saying, this is what we need. We need to actually deliver what the science says. We need to take legislation not as a party political thing, but as what does the science say is needed for us to actually deliver prosperity. And we need the government to take what they said as supporting the aims and objectives and put it into legislation. So we need that commitment to go beyond words and to say, actually, we're going to deliver on it by delivering new legislation on climate and nature. And we need to look at the international part. We need to say, does our existing actions have further consequences? And how do we actually look at our full consumption emissions? And the government are also voiced on the 24th of January that they understand that this is something that needs to be moved forward. So this isn't just a wish list. This is all moving forward, but we need to lock it into law, as I keep mentioning. So what's next? We need more than statements. We need this to be legally binding targets. We need to make sure the meetings that we have with the government lead to a pathway to further debate and delivering this into law. And that starts with constituency pressure, which Jamie's going to cover, but is really important. The next stage of the campaign will be all about how do we build pressure in every constituency, regardless of who your MP is, to say every single corner of the country is behind the MP if the MP gets behind this legislation, giving them the confidence that it's a vote winner, giving them the confidence that they will get support from local residents, and how do we bring people along that journey with us. So that's what this evening's going to be covering. I'm going to pass on to Jamie, who'll be covering the specifics of what we're going to be doing with local pressure, which will be all about MP meetings and demonstrating the support in each and every constituency in the UK. But for now, I'm going to pass on to Jamie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And do remember, if you have any questions as we go over, pop them in the chat and we'll aim to answer as many at the end as we can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. I know some of you have been having trouble with the sound this evening, so I'm hoping my microphone is going to be nice and clear for you. Do let me know if I need to speak up, and I'll be more than happy to. It's lovely to see so many of you here tonight. My name is Jamie Russell, and I'm the Grassroots Manager at 0 Hour. So Alan has done a fantastic job this evening of telling you about why we need this new legislation. It's my job this evening to explain how we're going to achieve that as campaigners. So I'm just going to take us back to January. Many of you here will remember when the bill went for its second reading in the Houses of Parliament in January, we saw the government threaten something unusual, which was a 3-line whip against the bill. It was quite a shock for us here at 0 Hour, because this is something that rarely happens with private members' bills. You have to go back quite a way in time. I think Boris Johnson, it happened once with Boris Johnson. I think the time before that was maybe Margaret Thatcher. So really quite an unusual event to happen. And so afterwards, I spoke to a gentleman whose name is Ron Bailey, who some of you may know. Ron is our parliamentary advisor, and he's something of a legend in parliamentary circles. He's the campaigner who holds the record for being responsible for pushing the most private members' bills through Parliament, kind of supporting the campaigns behind them. And he's been doing this since the 1960s, and he's done it under governments of every stripe. So he really is kind of the font of all knowledge when it comes to private members' bills. So I asked him, I said, Ron, look, how can we ever succeed when the government is willing to use its power to quash a private member's bill that it doesn't like? What exactly happens? Bring it back in the next session. What's to stop the whips from killing it all over again? And his answer was really clear and really quite inspirational. He said that you need to make sure that MPs are more afraid of their constituents than they are of the whips. And I was like, well, how do we do that? And he said two words: constituency pressure. And this is what he said was the key. He said, you need to make sure, or we need to make sure collectively, that MPs are feeling the heat in their constituencies. And then he rattled off a series of examples of private members' bills throughout the years that had been defeated at their first go in the Commons and then had come back and gone on to become law. And in each case, the turnaround was because constituents had put pressure on their MPs to get them to back it and to say to them, look, we really need you behind this legislation. And that was the key thing that happened. And the idea, as Ron explained it to me, was that if MPs realise that their constituents are upset, they will begin to wonder how safe their seats are going to be at the next election. And they will start thinking about, do they need to be pushing back against the whips? And do they need to be listening more to their constituents? And this is particularly true for those MPs whose majorities in their constituencies are not very high. And since the election a year ago, there are an awful lot of marginal seats now with MPs who are wondering whether or not they will be seeing a second term. So, in terms of what we're asking you to do, this September, we are asking residents in each constituency to organise meetings with their MPs. Now, this is very different from what we've done in the past, where we've maybe asked you just to go along and have a chat to your MP on a one-on-one basis. This time around, we're asking you to go as groups of individuals, representatives from local organisations. This can be anything from faith groups to nature groups and everything in between, to meet your MP together to push them on the need for the climate and nature bill. And the aim is very much to build what we could describe as collective power within your constituency, so that when you go to your MP, it's not just you by yourself asking them to give you their attention. You're part of a coalition, as it were, of local people and groups who are all asking for the CAN bill to be made into the CAN Act. So imagine the power of me walking in, not just as Jamie Russell to meet my MP, but I'm going along as myself, but with me is a representative from the local wildlife trust, someone from the local sustainability group, maybe a couple of local councillors, someone from the faith group that I'm part of, my local Friends of the Earth group, local business leaders, that kind of cross-section of the constituency going to meet the MP to ask them to get behind this new legislation. And that really is where the power lies, because when the MPs realise that, as it were, the whole of the constituency, each sector of the constituency is asking them to do this, they will have to sit up and take notice. Now, lots of you on this call I've seen in the chat are saying, some of you are saying, well, I've got an MP who doesn't want to support this kind of legislation. Some of you have got MPs who are already supporting this legislation. There's a whole spectrum of different MPs who are at different places in their relationship to taking climate and nature action and recognising the need for new legislation. And what I'd say to you is, regardless of who your MP is, and regardless of what party they're from, and regardless of where they're at in terms of their awareness of the urgency of the need for new legislation, you can still make a difference by having a meeting with them. So we can give you tailored asks for each individual MP in order to ensure that they do the best they can to get the climate and nature bill up the agenda. So if your MP isn't already supporting the bill, it may be, the ask is very simple. But if your MP is already a CAN bill supporter, we can ask them to raise questions in committee. We can ask them to encourage their colleagues to sign up to support the bill, or writing to ministers to request a meeting to discuss the legislation. And if you have an MP who you really don't think in any way is going to engage with this, then we can look at other ways of putting pressure via local press, via the councils. So whatever the situation in your constituency, there is a way that we can use this process to really maximise the chances of increasing the number of MPs behind the bill, raising awareness about the bill, and putting the bill itself front and centre of the agenda and the national conversation that's currently happening. Now, some of you may be listening to me talking about this. Maybe you've never even met your MP before, and you might be thinking, well, this is really daunting. But my advice to you is, don't worry. Our plan on this is really a wraparound plan. We are going to be supporting you and your fellow campaigners in your constituency all the way. We're not asking you to be an expert on the bill. You just need to be passionate about the need for climate and nature action. And ahead of your MP meeting, we're going to be providing you with a pack of materials to ensure that you have everything you need. So this will be a specific CAN-bill MP briefing pack, will be one of the main things that you can give to your MP, which will explain the necessity for the bill, why it's so important, why currently the government isn't doing everything that's needed in order to meet our international targets that Alan was talking about. We'll also have a dedicated letter from the constituents in your constituency. So people who have already signed up to support the CAN bill, we can add them onto this. We can really show your MP that there is a collective push from individuals and organisations and groups within the constituency who are keen for this action. And that letter will really explain why the climate and nature bill matters in particular for your specific constituency. So the MP realises that this isn't just a question of national and international climate and nature action. It actually is really rooted in community and localism. So everything that's happening in your community that explains the reason why we need this bill. So Alan was talking about the wildfires in his constituency. In my constituency in Shrewsbury, it's endless flooding. So I think all of us probably are seeing in one way or another some kind of climate and nature impacts happening in our locale, in our constituency that we can talk to our MP about. On top of that, I talked to you about tailored asks that are specific for the MPs. This will be something our parliamentary team here at Zero will be working out, for every MP, what exactly is it that we'd be asking them to do in order to maximise the amount of pressure and really to get the best out of that meeting that we're going to be asking you to set up with your MP. And then finally, we'll also be connecting you up with local campaigners ourselves, local groups, local organisations, in order to give you the best shot. So it won't just be you going in there to speak to your MP on your own. You really will, with our help, be building that coalition of local CAN-bill campaigners. So you might be thinking, okay, that all sounds great. What exactly are you asking me to do? Well, there's a series of steps here, and don't worry about this because we will email you after this event and we will break it down into something really simple, but I'll run you through the general thinking of what we're doing. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you're signed up to our constituency pressure campaign. There's a Google form which one of my colleagues is going to pop in the chat now. We will send it in the email after this event. Some of you may have already signed up already. That's great. It just lets us keep track of everyone who's taking part so that we can give you all the resources you need. So that would be the starting point. And then the second thing is we're asking you to reach out to your MP and request that constituency meeting. Now, we're really, really fortunate that the timing of this has coincided with the Climate Coalition's own push for local constituency meetings. So we're partnering up with the Climate Coalition on this. Their website, again, I'll pop the link in the email to you after this, has a specific tool that you can use to request an MP meeting. So they've made it really nice and simple. We're asking the MP, saying we want a meeting to talk to them about climate and nature issues. And what we really want is for as many of you as possible in each constituency to be clicking that button on the Climate Coalition's tool, asking for the meeting so that MPs are like, oh, this is a really big deal. Lots of my constituents are asking for a meeting. I really need to organise something. So again, it's that power of not just one person asking for this, but lots of people throughout the constituency asking for it. The Climate Coalition has set this up for in September. So from today, if you go on the website, the tool is already there. You can click through and request a meeting for September with your MP. From the 11th of August, so in a week's time, the Climate Coalition will be collating all the MP meetings across the country and putting them on the map so that you can see which constituencies have already requested meetings, which ones have been approved, when they're happening. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes here to make this really manageable and easy for everybody. And once you have a meeting set up, the key thing that we're asking you to do then to ensure that it isn't just you going along to this meeting is to spread the word in your constituency about it so that we get as many people as possible all to go to the same meeting with your MP. Meanwhile, we'll do the same at our end. So for me here, my constituency is Shrewsbury. So once there's a meeting set up with the MP in Shrewsbury, we would be sending it out to all the groups that we know are supporting the CAN bill within this constituency, telling them about the meeting, telling them about the time and the date, and asking them to come along. And the real hope is that MPs will realise there is a huge appetite within the constituency for a meeting with them to talk about the CAN bill and to get them to back it. And I think that will be something that will be quite unusual for MPs, I think, to really feel that kind of community pressure rather than just maybe one or two constituents asking about this. This, as I said, this really is this idea of collective power across the whole of the constituency. And the aim, as I said, is to get as many different representatives there from your community as possible. Faith leaders, business leaders, um, local charities, maybe someone from a local school, because this is an issue that does affect the whole constituency. So it really is that idea of a cross-community request from the constituents to the MP to take action. And the final thing we'll do, as I said, is linking you all up. So that will be all part of this process, is us making sure that if there are 10 people in your constituency who are all wanting to do this, we'll find ways of putting you all in touch so that you can collaborate together and you can really find the best way to kind of spread that call outwards to get as many people from as many different corners of your constituency to want to take action. Now, I know that's a lot of steps to follow. As I said, don't worry, we're going to break it down so it's really nice and easy for everyone. The key thing to do this evening, if you haven't already done it, is sign up on the constituency pressure Google form page that we've got that's in the chat. Once you've done that, then we'll be sending you out the emails and we'll break it down into small chunks so it's really nice and easy to do. Now, the Climate Coalition is hoping to see MP meetings happening in the week of the 13th to the 20th of September. And this is really a nationwide initiative to have as many people as possible talking to their MPs in that week following the mass lobby in Parliament. This is kind of now a distributed mass lobby down at a constituency level. It's a different kind of conversation, I think, in many ways, rather than people going to Parliament. This is people meeting their MP embedded in the local community that MP represents and the local community that needs that MP to really be stepping up and taking action. In January, when the Climate and Nature Bill went to Parliament, we saw what could be achieved by people putting pressure on their MPs. I think in January alone, 30,000 people emailed their MP to say, we want you to be at the second reading of the Climate and Nature Bill. And that was why that debate in January was so amazing and was so historic, is that the power of constituents filled the chamber with their representatives. And now we're basically going to do the same, but this time in every constituency in the UK. So as I said, we're going to guide you through the whole process. We're not going to leave you to muddle through this on your own. We're going to give you all the support you need, all the materials you need. And we really hope that by meeting your MP as a constituency group, we can really move the dial towards the legislation that we need. So I do hope that you'll be able to join us for this. I think it's going to be a really exciting September coming up. And on that note, I will hand back to Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. So now we've got a few questions that are in the chat. So we're going to go through as many of them as we can, and we'll go from there. So one of the questions from Rebecca, are these meetings part of the local lobby? So the answer is yes and no. We're very much interconnected with the mass lobby, and which is happening the 13th to the 20th September. And we'll be coordinating a lot. We're a member of the Climate Coalition, so we'll be part of that week. But if your MP does come back and say, I can't meet in that week, do keep pushing for a meeting at a different date, and we can support you, even if it doesn't take part in that week. And a similar question, which is all about sort of connections. How do we have combined messages or similar messages with groups like Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth? Well, the Climate Coalition, this sort of mass lobby week is all about that. It's all about how do we work together for shared goals. So we join meetings with all these other organizations and speak about what our asks might be. How do we find similarities? And there's a little bit of work from our side on this too, which is how do we demonstrate the CAN bill can deliver some of the same objectives that their campaigns are doing, but very much is something that we want to collaborate with. And we are also happy to reach out to local groups and speak about how do we get all of our asks introduced. But the CAN bill currently is the most active live climate and nature legislation that's before Parliament. So it is a very tangible ask that we can say, rather than saying, will you increase spending on this? This is a thing that the MP can do literally turn up and vote for it, call for a debate, mention a committee that's live currently in Parliament. Yeah, so another question which was also about the mass lobby. So yeah, very much connected. So okay, so yeah, so when it's people who have particular MPs, so there's mention of people who have ministers, we will be giving tailored asks. So the ask isn't necessarily just will you back the bill, because some of you might have MPs that already do. We will make the ask based on where they're at with their level of support. So if a minister is unlikely to come out and back it, we can do it where will you actually raise this in this particular committee that you're in, or will you have a meeting with Ed about it? We can tailor the asks based on where your MP's at, which is why every MP matters. So even if your MP is the biggest champion of the bill, the ask can be what can you do next to keep this on the agenda. So it can, will you raise it in Prime Minister's questions? Will you raise it in this particular committee? That type of thing. So we can always give you tailored asks, and we can also help connect you and coordinate meetings with local groups that may not understand why the CAN bill is a good ask to be part of a wider conversation on what needs to happen with climate nature, because local concerns will naturally come up, but it's one of a mixture of things that the MP can do to deliver on some of those local things that come up. Yeah, there's a question here which was about if your MP is not responding to having that meeting. So that is it's a one that comes up quite a lot, and what's important to remember in all of this is it likely isn't the MP not responding, it's the MP staff member not responding. And what's really good about being part of the Climate Coalition is that there'll be loads of people doing this. It won't just be you. There'll be lots of people asking for meetings with your MP. So every email to the MP asking for that meeting will help. So if they're not responding to just you or to you and 5 other people, when they start getting 15, 16 different people calling for the meeting, we're building that community pressure that the MP staff is much more likely to say to the MP, look, we have to get a meeting in place. The second thing that's a real benefit here is the fact that we're part of this coalition. So it will be organisations coming in behind you as constituents. So local wildlife trusts, local Friends of the Earth groups, local women's institutes. We are going to be mobilising as much of our supporting organisations to also call for that meeting, which means it's no longer will you meet 2 or 3 residents. It suddenly becomes will you meet with the WI, the National Trust, and 15 local people. And that's why the numbers really matter. Every email asking for that meeting adds pressure and adds an aspect of a mandate for why that MP should get behind it. I'm just going to quickly go through some of these other questions. Okay, so there's a question here from Gwen, which was about what about MPs who lost the whip over protesting particular issues. So this is a good one because the government have said they back the aims and objectives of the bill. The government have not said don't back the bill. In fact, 90 MPs back the CAN bill, and none of them specifically related to that lost the whip. So backing the CAN bill is not something that MPs are currently losing the whip over. The big thing we're trying to do is build the pressure so there isn't a 3-line whip when it comes back to Parliament. One of the things we've not covered in a huge amount of detail, but I know Kathy's mentioned, is when's the bill coming back for debate? So they adjourned the debate on the 24th of January, and we are basically, part of this is all trying to guarantee there's time for debate and time for this to be voted on. So how are we saying we need to prioritise this? So this will all be part of that pressure. How do we say you need to bring it back? I know we've got other, I've seen we've just got a new question. I'm just going to quickly read it. Yeah, so speaking about working with Green New Deal Rising, so we've reached out to them. We'll definitely be working with all of these organisations and how do we get shared goals, shared asks as part of this. And yeah, so absolutely, we're very much trying to collaborate with as many people as possible. We are focusing specifically on the climate nature bill part of this. But of course, there's so much shared interest that trying to say we're doing that and someone else is doing something else is not. We need to collaborate, basically, and that's why the climate coalition, the mass lobby that happened in July, and what's happening now is so critical. Let me just catch up with some of these questions. Do we have any celebrities backing that we can use for media attention? Yeah, absolutely. So we have people who've championed the bill quite publicly, people like Chris Packham and Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall and many others who we have lots of content which we can share with you where they're directly calling for this legislation to happen. So this is part of our strategy too, is how do we get people who are trusted figures in the public to publicly come out and say, actually, we can do more, we can do a little bit more. So we are very much working with that as part of our strategy. Yeah, so one of the things was about the fact the mass lobby also has things to do with devolved parliament. So that's true for me in Scotland too. The thing that makes so we very much encourage people to bring those issues directly to people who are representing devolved parliament. So, but obviously the CAN bill specifically is dealing with reserve matters, so is in Westminster specifically. But we do have MSPs and MSs who are backing the bill and calling for their Westminster counterparts to back it. So it is something that still has an effect. Yeah, so we also had about someone who had their mass lobby meeting being cancelled. So this isn't unique. I had the same thing. It's partly why we're trying to get as many people calling for this meeting to happen now, is so that it's on their terms. That's the difference with the mass lobby in London to the mass lobby now, is it's not everyone has to travel to London. So, you have to say, turn up at that time, can you make it? We're putting the hands to the MP saying, the MP has the chance to set the meeting of a time in their calendar within that week that works. Yeah, so there's also a question I've just seen pop up in the chat about will it be an open letter? So we just did a big open letter with one from every constituency, but it's still something that you can use as a tool. You can download it and hand that in, which has local signatures. We did that for every constituency in the country, but it's a really useful tool to actually have as a way of demonstrating that local support. And we have this new sort of constituency letter, which is about taking that support and passing it, using the MP to send it on to people who are on the front bench to say, on behalf of my constituents, we want you to listen to these concerns. So we do have a way that you can add local support at zerohour.uk. You can add local support that way, sign up as a supporter, and that means we can capture how many people support in each constituency and use that when we meet with MPs. So that's a good point. And let me just see if there's maybe Jamie, if you happen to see any other questions that I've missed, do just ask me them out loud. Oh, and I've seen one here. If we get a meeting MP and others couldn't make it to the lobby, people can come. We also have a question which was about if they offer multiple meetings. That is a hugely great champagne problem to happen. If you have more than one MP meeting happening in the same week, it just means you maximize the availability of other people who can come. Because I've had times where a friend of mine or a colleague of mine has said, I've got a meeting with our MP, it's on Wednesday afternoon. I'm like, I'm at work, I can't go. But at least then there's more than one meeting where you can get your voice heard. And it means the MP hears it more than one time, which is great. And really, it's about giving them the confidence that, it's asking them to the next best thing they can do, the next best step. And how do you bring them along with you? So saying, we actually will have your back if you come out and support it. Now, the tailored asks are done specifically on that basis. So it's how do we not go from you have a conservative who's completely against the bill to I want you to come out and raise it in Prime Minister's questions. It's the next best ask to bring them along on a journey. And we've seen that happen with MPs, where MPs are a little bit doubtful of aspects of the bill. So you say, I'm not asking you to come out and support it. I'm asking you to say, will you ask the government if you can debate it so you can find out more? There's always a next best thing they can do. And it's about demonstrating they're doing it on behalf of constituents. It's not about their particular interest, their particular position. It's about them representing local interest. And the more people that come to meetings, the more people that send them emails, the more people that raise this, the more there's a mandate for them to say, I have to raise this, even if it's not my party position. Enough local people are concerned by it. And there's some MPs that'll be harder to do that than others. But it does work, and we've seen it happen with MPs. So it's sometimes a bit of a long way to get there, but it does work. Okay, so we've had a question that's just jumped in the chat about reform and Conservative MPs backing the bill. So we have Conservative MPs who are co-sponsors of the bill. We don't have a lot of them, but we do have them that are joining. Reform, we won't be surprised, don't come out and support the bill. But there is, even if you're never a seat with a Reform MP, there's still things that you can do. Because when you write, say, for example, to local media about why you believe the bill is important, it's very likely that your local media will actually cover multiple constituencies, or at the very minimum, it will add to a growing amount of pressure nationally of local press covering local interests. So, but Conservatives, we have had them come on and support and be co-sponsors. So if you have a Conservative MP, a really good way of getting your Conservative MP to back the bill is to say, will you meet with, for example, Roger Gale or Simon Hoare, one of these Conservative MPs that back the bill, will you meet with your Conservative colleague about why they back this bill? So it's how do you use allies and trusted networks within their party to build on that relationships. And that's the true also for Labour. If you have a Labour MP that backs the bill, saying, will you meet with other Labour colleagues who don't yet back the bill about why you did it and why local residents supported it? I do want to sort of stress this point. It's the meeting your MP isn't always about telling them you have to get behind the bill. Sometimes it's about them already being behind the bill and saying, thank you so much for championing the bill. Will you help get this other person on board? Because my MP's backed it since he became an MP, but there's always another step that they can take. I'm just going to quickly open my blinds. I look like I'm in a cave.
While Alan's doing that, I'll just say, so a question from Tim in the chat, just talking about how do you envisage a group of local CAN bill supporters meeting together with their MP, presenting a consistent ask of the MP? And I just thought I'll jump on and answer this while Alan was just sorting his blinds out, which was just to go back to what I was saying in the section I was talking about, Tim. We will be giving campaigners who go to meet their MP a very specific MP briefing for MPs to read through to understand why the legislation is necessary. But there'll also be a letter from constituents, so any constituents can sign the letter, which is part of our kind of wider national push. So that letter will explain why the bill matters for the constituency. So I think by giving that letter across to the MP, there would definitely be a very clear focus in terms of what it is that's being asked of them and why it is that we're wanting them to pay attention to this legislation.
Yeah,
back to you, Alan.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, no, that's great. And something I'm going to touch on just while I will get back to where we're at with the questions, but I'll just touch on this because it's something that slipped my mind earlier, which is essentially the next stage of the campaign has been we've got so much support now, and it's about mobilizing all of that support together as much as possible. So these MP meetings are about how do we actually have constituents showing pressure and inviting local organizations to those meetings. And Jamie touched on there'll be a map of meetings that happen on the launch on the 11th. So if you have a meeting that gets confirmed, you can put it onto that map. And that means that people will know there's a local meeting, they'll know when it's happening and that they can join. And that's a great way that you can say, invite a local church group, invite a local wildlife group, invite a supporting scientist, invite a local health professional. You can bring people along that can demonstrate this support is not, it's constituents, it's organizations, it's health professionals, it's emergency service workers. It's, you know, it's a way of inviting people to say, I just want you to turn up with me at this meeting and say why you're also backing this legislation, and we can help connect you with some of those people in your constituency. Because almost every constituency has supporting organizations, whether they're national organizations or very local to your area, and we can say, this constituents organize a meeting, will you join them? So we'll support you, and we can get our allies to join you too. And we, as Jamie touched on, we will have specific asks based on the MP's level of support. So we will have that right the way through. Yeah, let me just see if I've answered most of them, I think. Yes, the question, can you clarify, are you sending contact details for other supporters in the constituencies? So sort of yes and no is the answer. We obviously, with GDPR, there's very particular ways that you can share people's details. But what's really great about what the TCC are doing is they will basically have a way that you can contact the person who's set up that meeting. So you can say, oh, I'm wondering, you know, are you planning on asking this? Can I join you? That type of stuff. We can also, if you are willing and you know, give us permission to, we can also send that to all supporters who are in your constituency. And most constituencies have more than 100 supporters of the CAN bill. So if you do the first stage and you get that MP meeting and say, okay, the MP meeting is happening on the 14th September at 2 p.m. and the main organizer is, let's say, Brian, we can say, here's the MP meeting. You can join Brian at this time. If you want to get in touch with them ahead of time, click this button and we can put you in touch with them. So both the TCC will have that function and we can also help with that. So we can't necessarily say, here's everyone's detail in your constituency, but we can say, here's someone who set up the meeting, or here's how you can find out more about what they're doing. So there is a way that you can connect to campaigners that way. And you probably noticed this with, if anyone turned up at the mass lobby on the 9th, this was the same sort of problem, like sort of stumbling block that happened there, is that basically there's data protection that prevents being able to say, here's everyone in your constituency, their name and their contact details, because not everyone sort of signed up to share all of that information. So we normally will focus it around essentially a key organizer who's happy for people to be in touch with them, saying, I'm happy to be a sort of a focus point for people in my constituency. And this hopefully will lead to a longer term set of pressure where you then, like on the 9th for people that went, you can say, oh, I now know 6 or 7 people who have met the MP, are interested in next steps, and they can work together on how can you move forward. Let me just see if there's other questions I haven't answered. So yeah, one that's just come up. Why is the government not supporting the bill at the moment? It would be good to understand the reasoning. So the easiest way to give this is to say, they technically say they do. They just haven't said we back it in its entirety. They say this sort of roundabout way where they say we back the aims and objectives of the bill. We think there's particular stumbling blocks to do with the fact that we are trying to make some of that ambition sooner than 2050. We're trying to say actually some of that decarbonisation has to happen earlier within the bill. And we also know that they have their own net zero strategy that they're developing, and there's a sense of like just leave it to us. The big thing that we're trying to do is to basically say, you've agreed to loads of this before. The NDCs, their contribution towards the Paris Agreement, they set themselves. The global biodiversity framework in Montreal, they signed up to. We are trying to say you should be held accountable to this emissions reduction. You should involve more people, and it should be happening, including international emissions and looking at a wider scope than you're looking at. So we're getting lots of MP responses that are giving us little bits of intel into the specifics, and that, in a way, it sounds strange for me to say this, but trust me, it is good news. The fact that we're getting these lots and lots of little things is a really good sign, because it's a sign that they're engaging with us on it. It's a sign that there is particular things that we can meet with them on and try and reassure them on. But the only way that they'll feel the need to keep engaging on it and not say we've got it covered is if constituents keep saying we're not going away, we need there to be more than there is now. And there's definitely, right now, that's the biggest gap. This might sound like a total oversimplification, but I'm going to go super simple just for the benefit of hitting this point home, which is right now, what the government says they're going to do and what's in law, there's a gap between them. And all we're doing is saying, we want to hold you accountable to what you're saying you're going to do. And we're trying to bridge the ambition gap between what's currently in legislation, what the science says is needed. And we're trying to, as close to that as we can possibly get, we're putting this to MPs and saying, how can we find where that in-between is to move the dial on what the science is and what's in legislation. So it's how do we keep shifting this position for more and more ambitious action. And the government not supporting it technically is just they're not supporting it in its full. They do support what the overall objectives are. And this meeting with Ed Miliband, which he's now said in public now twice, he said it at the Climate Nature Statement, to work with the people behind the bill, is going to be that next step of us saying we've got to push for this. We've got to find out exactly what those specifics are and tie them with leading scientists, leading experts, and saying this is what you're doing, this is what the science says is needed, and how do we try and connect? So hopefully we can try and bridge that gap, and we will be sending a sort of follow-up email. The follow-up email will be giving you all of these sort of next steps, the links directly to how do you sign up to find out more, how do you sign up to find out how to write an email to your MP to call for that meeting, what the ask will be, so giving you some guidance on the ask, and how we can connect you to other campaigners. So we will be guiding you through those next steps with a follow-up email, which goes to everyone, the people who've signed up to this call and people who are signed up to 0 Hour who couldn't make this call too. And with over 100 people in each constituency, we're confident that we'll have a lot of meetings happening and a lot of ways that you can join them. The biggest thing that I'll stress is that we are here specifically to help with those tailored asks for your constituencies. So any barrier you think that's there, we've probably experienced them before, and a lot of them we've managed to overcome. But we can't go through every single specific right now. But if you think my MP is never going to back it, email us, campaign@zerohour.uk, and we can work with you on how we overcome that. And every MP, even if you've got the most brilliant champion CAN bill campaign, there's another thing that people can do. So there is ways that we can move this forward. We've already seen them offering meetings with us. We've seen them moving the dial in terms of offering climate nature statements, working and conceding on aspects of how government run to do with joint up approaches. But now what we need is just to get us over that line by saying there's enough constituency pressure that saying that you support the aims and ambitions, saying it warm words are not going to cut it. We need this to be guaranteed in law, and we will be behind the MPs who come out and say, yeah, I've heard you, I hear this, and I can move this forward. So we'll be connecting you all, and hopefully we can get some of these MPs to champion the bill. But on that note, we have recorded this, so we'll also be sending the recording to everyone. If we haven't been able to get to your question, do email campaign@zerohour.uk. I'm sure we'll pop it in the chat. But you can rewatch the recording, or you can email us directly about specific questions. And I'm sure you'll also get emails if you're signed up to the Climate Coalition about wider plans for the lobby week. But this is how it relates to the CAN bill, and hopefully it's been useful. and we'll send you the recording. But thank you all for joining. It's really been a pleasure to see so many new faces and lots of people who've been with us from the beginning. There'll be lots of questions, I'm sure, that you still have, so do just keep in touch. Thanks now. Bye.